I had always wanted to be a model, ever since I can remember. I'd spend hours flipping through fashion magazines, imagining myself on those glossy pages. I'd watch runway shows on TV, mesmerized by the confidence, the glamour, the lights. I was tall enough, and some people said I was pretty enough, but I never had the courage to actually pursue it. I was scared of rejection, I guess. And let's face it, Bakersfield, California isn't exactly the fashion capital of the world. But then, one day, everything changed. Or at least I thought it had. I was working at the coffee shop, just like any other day. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of conversations and the occasional clinking of cups. It was a cozy little place, the kind where regulars had their favorite spots and new faces were always welcome. I'd just graduated high school, and this was my life for the time being. The transition from the structured world of school to the unpredictable rhythm of work was both exciting and daunting. I was saving up for college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The coffee shop was my safe haven, a place where I could blend in and observe the world. But then he walked in. There was something different about him, something that made him stand out from the usual crowd of customers. He had an air of confidence, a kind of presence that was hard to ignore. At first, I thought he was just another customer. He approached the counter with a casual smile, ordered a black coffee, and took a seat by the window. But there was something in the way he looked at me, a kind of intensity that made me feel both self-conscious and intrigued. He kept staring at me. It wasn't the creepy kind of stare, but more like he was trying to figure something out. I could feel his eyes on me as I moved around, making drinks and chatting with customers. It was weird, but kind of flattering, you know? I mean, who wouldn't be a little flattered by that kind of attention? Especially when you're just a regular girl working a regular job. He introduced himself as Ethan. There was a warmth in his voice, a kind of genuine interest that made me feel at ease. He wasn't just another customer, he was someone who wanted to know more about me. Said he was a photographer. He pulled out his camera, showing me some of his work. The photos were stunning, capturing moments of beauty and emotion in a way that was truly captivating. Told me he thought I had potential, that I had a unique look that could really stand out in the modeling world. It was a lot to take in, but there was something about the way he said it that made me believe him. He said I could be a model. I had to pinch myself to prove this wasn't a dream. He showed me a portfolio of other models he had worked with, each one more impressive than the last. It was hard not to get caught up in the excitement of it all. He gave me his card. It felt like a ticket to a whole new world. Said he could help me build a portfolio for free. He explained that he was always on the lookout for new talent and that he believed in giving people a chance. It sounded almost too good to be true. I asked him why he'd do it for free. It was a fair question. I needed to know if there was a catch. He said if I got signed with an agency, they'd pay him a finder's fee. It made sense. He wasn't just doing it out of the goodness of his heart. There was a business aspect to it. But it still felt like an incredible opportunity, and I was desperate to believe him. I wanted to believe that this could be my big break. I wanted to believe that I could step out of the coffee shop and into a world of possibilities. It was a chance I couldn't pass up, and in that moment, I decided to take a leap of faith. The next day, we drove out to the desert. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the endless stretches of sand. The drive was long, but the anticipation of the shoot kept us energized. The desert, with its vast open spaces and undulating dunes, promised a unique backdrop for our photos. He said natural light and open spaces would make for stunning photos. The way the sunlight played off the sand, creating intricate patterns and shadows, was mesmerizing. We set up our equipment, and I could feel the excitement building. Ethan was enthusiastic, sharing his vision for the shoot and how the desert's raw beauty would enhance the images. But the moment we got out there, I felt it. A twinge of fear. The desert, while beautiful, was also intimidating. The vastness of it all made me feel small and vulnerable. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional gust of wind. We were all alone. No one around for miles. The isolation was both a blessing and a curse. It meant we had the freedom to shoot without interruptions, but it also meant that if something went wrong, there would be no one to help. Ethan assured me that everything would be fine, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. At first, it was fine. He took some shots, told me I was doing great. The initial photo shoot went smoothly, and I started to relax. His encouragement helped, and I began to enjoy the process. The desert's beauty was captivating, and I felt a sense of accomplishment as we reviewed the shots. They were stunning, just as he had promised. But then, he pulled out a rope. My heart skipped a beat. The rope was thick and coarse, and I couldn't understand why he had brought it. It seemed out of place in the serene desert setting. I looked at him, hoping for an explanation that would make sense. Said he wanted to try something edgy, a bondage theme. His voice was calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made me uneasy. He explained that the contrast between the harshness of the rope and the softness of the desert would create a powerful image. But all I could think about was how uncomfortable and vulnerable it would make me feel. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. I hoped he would understand and respect my boundaries. The desert, which had seemed so beautiful moments ago, now felt like a trap. That's when he changed. His smile disappeared. His eyes darkened. The friendly, enthusiastic photographer I had been working with was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. His demeanor shifted, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The desert's silence now felt oppressive, amplifying the tension between us. He got angry, told me if I wanted to be a model, I had to take direction. His voice was harsh, and his words stung. I felt trapped, unsure of what to do. I knew I had to stand my ground, but the fear was overwhelming. The photo shoot had taken a dark turn, and I was desperate to find a way out. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, he grabbed my wrist. Hard. The grip was like a vice, unyielding and merciless. I could feel the pressure building, the bones in my wrist protesting against the force. Panic surged through me, a cold wave that made my heart race and my mind scream for escape. I tried to pull away, but his hold was too strong, too determined. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment, anticipating my every move. I fought, I screamed. My voice echoed in the empty air, a desperate plea for help that seemed to vanish into the void. Each scream was a raw, primal sound filled with the terror of someone who knew they were in grave danger. I clawed at his hand, my nails digging into his skin, but he didn't flinch. Instead, his grip tightened, and I could feel the bruises forming under his fingers. But we were in the middle of nowhere, and there was no one to hear me. The vast, empty landscape stretched out around us, a silent witness to my struggle. The isolation was suffocating, amplifying my fear. There were no houses, no cars, no signs of life, just an endless expanse of nothingness. It was as if we had been swallowed by the earth, hidden away from the world. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was completely alone. He was stronger than me. His strength was overwhelming, a brutal reminder of my own vulnerability. He pushed me to the ground, his weight pinning me down. I struggled, my body thrashing against his, but it was like fighting against a mountain. His hands were everywhere, rough and unyielding, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest, threatening to choke me. The rope was coarse, biting into my skin with every movement. I could feel the fibers digging into my flesh, leaving angry red marks that burned with each twist and turn. My hands went numb, the circulation cut off by the tight bindings. I tried to wriggle free, but it was useless. The rope bit into my skin. Each movement sent a fresh wave of pain shooting up my arms. My breathing turned shallow, frantic. Each breath was a struggle, my lungs fighting to take in air. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a painful reminder of my fear. My vision started to blur, the edges darkening as the panic took over. I knew I had to calm down, to try and think clearly, but it was impossible. The fear was too strong, too overpowering. I kicked, I thrashed, but he only laughed. His laughter was cold, devoid of any humanity. It sent chills down my spine, making my skin crawl. I could feel his breath on my neck, hot and suffocating. I tried to twist away to get some distance between us, but it was no use. He was too strong, too determined. His laughter echoed in my ears, a haunting sound that I knew I would never forget. Then he took out a crossbow. The sight of it made my blood run cold. I could see the sharp, deadly point of the arrow, glinting in the sunlight. My mind raced, trying to understand what was happening, but it was too much. The fear, the pain, the confusion, it was all too much. I asked him what it was for. My voice trembled. My whole body shook. I could barely get the words out, my throat tight with fear. I needed to know, needed to understand what was happening. But even as I asked, I knew the answer wouldn't bring me any comfort. It would only make the fear worse. He just smiled and said, "You'll see." His smile was cold, devoid of any warmth. It was the smile of a predator, someone who took pleasure in the fear of others. It made my skin crawl, my stomach churn. I knew then that there was no reasoning with him, no pleading for mercy. He was going to do whatever he wanted, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The fear was all-consuming, a dark cloud that threatened to swallow me whole. The sun burned down on us, but I felt cold. So cold. The heat of the sun was a cruel contrast to the icy fear that gripped my heart. I could feel the sweat on my skin, but it did nothing to warm me. The fear was too strong, too overpowering. I knew then that I was in a fight for my life, and I didn't know if I would survive. He turned his back for just a second. Maybe he thought I was too scared to fight. Maybe he just didn't care. Either way, it was his mistake. The rope wasn't as tight as he thought. I twisted my wrists, ignoring the pain as the fibers tore at my skin. I yanked my arms free. I grabbed a rock. He turned just as I swung. The rock cracked against his head with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. Blood trickled down his forehead. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran. The desert stretched before me, endless and merciless. My lungs burned. My legs screamed in agony. The dry air clawed at my throat, but I kept running. Then I heard it. The twang of the crossbow string. An arrow hissed through the air, barely missing my shoulder. Another, then another. The sound of them slicing past me was almost worse than if they had hit me. Then the road. I could see it, just ahead. A thin strip of salvation awaited me. I forced my legs to move faster. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me. Closer, closer. Then, in the distance, a shape. A semi-truck. My heart soared. I waved my arms, frantic, screaming for help. The truck screeched to a stop. The driver jumped out, took one look at me, sweat-soaked, panting, terrified, and knew something was wrong. I collapsed into the cab, sobbing, gasping for air. I tried to tell him what had happened, but the words tangled in my throat. He didn't need to hear them. He just threw the truck into gear and drove. I thought it was finally over, but it was just the beginning. We went straight to the police station. They asked me a lot of questions, showed me photos of other women. One of them was Jessica. She disappeared 6 months ago. They found her body in the desert. I thought that so-called photographer was giving me a chance to live my dream. Instead, he showed me a nightmare. A nightmare that other women had not survived. But I had made it, and I'd brought him to justice. The police tracked him down and I testified against him. Now he's where he belongs, behind bars. He'll never be able to hurt another woman. I feel I was sent to the desert with him for a reason. I had a mission, even though I didn't know it at the time. I was sent to stop him. And guess what? Against all odds, I did.